confronts him about it, and he's acting like, what, man? What's the big deal? What are you talking about? Like, as if you can hide it from God, right? So here we have Cain and Abel 2.0, but it's even worse because 10 out of the 11 brothers are ready to just outright kill him and then throw his body in the pit and then cover the whole thing up, right? The crime is bad enough, but then you're going to make a whole conspiracy about a wild animal, and you're going to conceal the body. And only Reuben, God bless him, has the common sense to say, whoa, wait a second here. Just throw him into the pit, But of course he thinks, well, I'm going to circle back around later on and I'll get a rope and I'll fish him out of there and I'll give him back to his, and then I don't know what his motive was. Maybe he actually did care. He probably did more than the brothers did, that's for sure. But he has it in mind, instead of just standing up as the firstborn and taking full authority and said, if you kill him, you're going to have to kill me too. He says, he thinks, well, I'll just circle back. He's not willing to fight his brothers to the death, right? So, but he does at least try to rescue him, right? But now notice here, Christology, they strip him, right? What do we do on Good Friday? We strip the altar in preparation for the Sabbath rest, for the Easter Vigil. Why is the word escaping me? I'm getting too old. The vigil, the Easter Vigil on Saturday. We strip the altar that symbolizes Christ has his flesh stripped from him, right? Though they could not destroy his immortality, they at least tried to destroy his life in this world, right? So that's what you see in the stripping of Christ and the stripping of Joseph. You see the prefigurement of a type of death, a type of crucifixion. They're going to take off his mortal covering, right? They're going to strip him of this robe of many colors, right? Now, many of the early church fathers, like for example in this book, and there's so many hundreds of these books, which go into great depth on the writing. They come up with the allegorical meaning of this, the Christological meaning of this, and the robe of many colors, although it meant certainly something to Jacob and it meant something to Joseph, Christologically speaking, Christ is the type of many colors in that the many nations worship him. He has the office of prophet, priest, and king. He is the one that's been set apart by God to wear this special office, right? Because when Joseph is walking around, he sticks out like a sore thumb, right? They can see him coming they saw him coming from a mile away. Well, if he was just dressed like some dusty sheep herder guy, they might have taken him a little bit longer to figure out who he is. But they saw him coming so long that they had a full plan cooked up by the time. So they had hundreds and hundreds of yards, maybe a mile or two if they were up on higher ground. It's like, here he comes, They knew right away it was him, right? So it is with the generation.
They really did not like him.
No. And that way, the generation in which Jesus comes is also prefigured, and that these sons of Israel are a type of Sanhedrin, right? You've got the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and they're constantly doing what? They're constantly doing verbal battle with Jesus. They're conspiring against him. All throughout the Gospels, the death threats start way before Holy Week, right? They tried to stone him on several occasions, but Jesus went out of the temple, or he hid himself and went out of the temple, the Gospels say, right? So, but ultimately, they do get their hands on him. They strip him and they cast him into a pit. In the Old Testament, the pit is often symbolic of Sheol. You'll hear the psalmist, right? Going down to the pit. Who can praise you, O God, from the depths, from the pit? So the pit is like death, right? Jesus, when they strip him of his outer flesh, he's cast into the pit. His body is laid into the tomb. He descends into, as we say, into hell. He goes down to the Abraham bosom, but the Abraham's bosom, both the righteous compartment and the unrighteous compartment, and he proclaims the victory, the gospel, to even the souls held captives in that place before the flood, Peter writes, right? So in that way, the pit is Sheol, it's Abraham's bosom. Christ is cast into the tomb. He's stripped of his outer flesh, but they could not destroy his immortality, his soul, his spirit, his divine nature, his eternal substance with the Father, right? Now, also here you have, it's not an accident that the whole 20 shekels of silver is brought up too. Now for Jesus, it's how many? 30 shekels, right? So in this way, you have the selling of so many pieces of silver, right? Which is obviously like, that's not an accident. Now, a skeptic would say, well, then why wasn't it exactly 30 and 30, right? Well, the early church fathers say, well, again, these things don't perfectly, you don't have a perfect replay. It's to point you, type and shadow. It's hidden, right? And so you could also say, as like Ambrose and St. John of Chrysostom and many of the early church fathers rightly noted, is that in this way, remember, Joseph is still a servant. He is not the master. When Jesus comes, he is the master, right? He is the true son, the ultimate fulfillment. So of course, the son and the heir is sold at a higher price than the servant is, right? And so that's why you see Joseph is sold for less and Christ is sold for more. But they're still both sold, right, for money. They're actually trying to profit off of their death. And Judas in this way is the ultimate Israelite, right, in that he sells his own brother. He has an office, the office of the, and that's pastors can fall, apostles can fall, right? You see Judas not only selling Christ a profit, but he also gives up his office, as Peter prophesies from the Old Testament. Let another take his place. He's called the son of perdition, right? The son of hell, because of this betrayal, right? So in every way, as St. John of Chrysostom's this is a bloodthirsty, dreadful malice we're seeing, right? This is real, gruesome sin without repentance, right? The hardest of hearts, right? Imagine maybe you have a sibling you don't like. Many families do, right? And they don't like you and you don't like them, and you say, well, blood is thicker than water. Well, you have to work that stuff out. But imagine the hardness of your heart, or the hardness of the heart of a sibling that would literally strip, cast into a pit, sell into slavery, make up a story, cook it up, tell it to the parents. Well, I don't know what happened to little Johnny over there. I don't know. A wild animal must have came and tore to pieces, We're talking about and then to profit off of it financially shows you the spiritual state of these men. Now, Reuben, again, is to receive some commendation or recognition or praise because he's planning on circling back. But the problem is, in the moment of truth, if you're not willing to give your life for something that's true and right and good and godly, if you try to circle back to save yourself, you may not have the opportunity to do that. Yeah. So he should have stood his ground and been willing to die. His brothers probably would have backed off. But he kind of goes along with it for whatever reason, thinking he can save the situation on the back end, hours or days later.
Well,
but of course, the opportunity is lost.
In this case, he really can't, because then it wouldn't happen.
Yes, right. And of course, God knows all these things, right? So God knows each person's heart down through the ages, down through history, every generation, whether it's the generation of Cain and Abel, or the generation of Joseph and his brothers, or the generation of Christ and his brothers. He knows each human heart, and whatever plan the devil makes, whatever plan humans make, God works around all of the chicanery, as they would say in Ireland. All of the nonsense, all of the sin, all of the scheming and the plans, he works around it and he makes his will come to pass so that nothing or no one in heaven on earth can thwart what God is planning to do. And of course, all of this is to prepare future generations for the fact that Jesus is the fulfillment of all of these earlier things in all of its fullness, right? So then you can look back and say, the wisdom of the Lord, as the scripture says. Who can understand his ways, right? It's beyond human understanding, right? So that's why, whether it's being stripped of this robe, the outer flesh, if you will, being cast down in the pit, being sold for 20 shekels of silver, cooking up a story, the fratricide, that is the plotting to kill one's own brother. St. Paul would write to the church at Philippi in the 2nd chapter that Jesus takes on the form of a servant, right? He puts on human flesh, the incarnation at Christmas, at Epiphany. He takes the form of a servant, right? And in order to even have his own blood shed on behalf of his fallen brothers, right? Now, if you look at it logically, would Jacob have forgiven his sons in the moment if he had caught them all red-handed? I guarantee you there would have been a reckoning, right? There would have been punishment. There would have been payback.
So they feared their father.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're not doing this around the household. They've got him out in the wild, right?
Way out there.
Yeah. So in this way, although there is a bloodthirsty and dreadful malice at work, God still saves Joseph, saves his son, right, Jesus, and by saving with resurrection, by saving Joseph with a type of resurrection, as we're going to find out later on when he takes him out of prison, out of slavery, and then sets him up as basically Pharaoh for all intents and purposes, second only to the king. And through the life, death, and suffering, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, God overcomes our sin, all fratricide, all scheming and planning, whatever the devil and mankind has cooked up, God is able to rescue even from the grave, so that nothing and no one can thwart God's plan of salvation. So there you go. That's a little bit of Christology there. If that all makes sense. Did I cover all your questions? Hopefully.
This wasn't a big deal, but I was curious about the pits. What were they there for?
Yeah, well, whenever you have hills, there's going to be crevices or cracks. You ever seen like YouTube shorts or videos of be careful when you go hiking in the glaciers even, because what are glaciers? Glaciers are mountains of ice, right? And they're like, oh, what a beautiful clear puddle of water, I can drink that glacier. Let me just step, and you think, well, we step into puddles here all the time. Well, if you step into a puddle that's on a glacier, it may be 300 feet, 1,000 feet straight down, and people have actually... That's why they're like, do not step on any puddle of water on a glacier.
So they're not necessarily handmade.
Right, that's why they're not man-made.
No, these are crevices or wherever they're at, there are these natural geological pits. And because
it's like a road with a big chuck hole in it.
Yeah, a big old chuckle. So you'll notice here it says, and it wasn't even filled with water, right? Because they have a raining season there, just like you have monsoons in Southern California. Remember, I compared the climates there. When the monsoon rains come in southern Israel, even today they'll get deluge of water. You have these dry riverbeds, which suddenly become flash flood zones, right? Because the water comes down out of the hills. You get 4 inches of rain in a desert. In the hill country, the water's coming down, and it's coming down fast. And the creek beds flow, the pits fill with water. And of course, I'm sure Reuben is probably thinking, well, I can circle back and get him because we're in the dry season. We're not going to get a flash flood. He won't drown in the pit. therefore I can save him later. Of course, that was not to be because he made the mistake of walking away from his fratricidal brothers, who it should have occurred to him. You would have thought that if these men are capable of this, I better not even walk away.
Yeah.
He walks away to probably go pick up some sheep out in a few fields over or whatever, and they're like, aha, now Reuben is gone. Now we can go all the way with this, right? All right. So next week we will pick up with the Ishmaelites. You've heard that name Ishmael before, right? Mm-hmm. The Ishmaelites are also going to profit off of this, and Joseph is going to be saved in a sort of way. Although you'd be like, well, I don't know if I'd be. Well, he's at least saved from death, right? Although he is going to be sold into slavery. He's going to be sold a second time, this time into slavery. And you're thinking, well, if I have to be a slave, at least be a slave in the household of a captain of a guard. But then we're going to see, okay, well, then he's betrayed again, right? So here he's going to be betrayed a third time. Then we're going to find out he's betrayed a fourth time. And there's all of these consecutive betrayals, which of course what happens to Jesus, right? Betrayal, 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 betrayal. You're thinking, well, he was only betrayed once by Judas. No, Peter denied him, 3 times. There was many betrayals, right? They all hid away, as he was dying on the cross, except for Mary and John. So he was abandoned, betrayed, left for dead, etc., etc., etc. So all of this is typology, Christology. Any questions? All right, go in peace, serve the Lord. God